So dear participants, welcome to this important session on mechanism for strengthening social protection and local recovery that is organized by UNDP and ILO with partners. Social protection is instrumental in the achievements of many of the Sustainable Development Goals, addressing the leaving no one behind ambition. Reducing inequalities and social exclusions is a fundamental element of it. It is also a human right. The value of social protection coverage has become more evident than ever during the social economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis. The human development setback from the crisis have been dampened by existing social protection. At the same time, the large gaps in coverage have become hard to ignore. In response to COVID-19, low-income countries have been able to adopt fewer and less diversified social protection measures. At the global level, the Global Accelerator on Job and Social Protection, launched by the Secretary General in 2021, is building a coalition to help close the coverage gap in countries and build resilience for the future. Globally, 53.1% of the global population, roughly 4.1 billion people, do not have access to even one social protection benefit. The coverage gap in Africa, Asia, and the Arab states are much larger than the global average. With such a massive coverage gap, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened poverty and inequality. The pandemic resulted in 97 million more people in extreme poverty in 2020. The pandemic has also increased global inequality and is particularly hard for poor urban households. Communities in fragile and conflict-affected countries and regions are now exposed to additional risks in an already challenging context. Today with us, we have a distinguished set of panelists who will address some key dimensions of what this will be involved and what are some of the key challenges. Based on their experience, they will share some best practices and opportunity in building stronger social protection systems. Let me now pass the floor to our keynote speaker, Ms. Michiko Miyamoto. Ms. Miyamoto is the country director for ILO in Indonesia and Timor-Leste, a position she has held since 2017. She has worked in the field in international development for over 20 years, including in ILO headquarters and at the Regional Office for Asia and Pacific. Ms. Miyamoto, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and good evening to audience in the room. This is the last session of the day, and my greetings to online participants. It is a pleasure to speak on behalf of the ILO today on the important issue covering social protection and decent jobs. The COVID-19 pandemic, in addition to claiming more than 4 million lives, has caused an unprecedented loss of jobs and livelihood. This has exacerbated income insecurity around the world, particularly more than half of the global population without any access to social protection, and especially those working in the informal economy. The impact on inequalities in terms of setback from the past progress made, especially on gender and also on persons with disabilities, has been heavy. In this context, countries with strong social protection system have clearly had an advantage in responding to and recovering from the crisis. At the same time, the pandemic has accelerated the rise of the digital economy, and it contributed to fostering the transition to a green economy. In the recovery phase, countries must seize the opportunities to build forward better. That means to design and implement human-centered policies and invest strategies with forward-thinking, forward-looking, for creating decent jobs with social protection in the green, care, digital economies, supporting sustainable development and a just transition for all, building resilience to any future crisis. The mission of the ILO in the post-COVID-19 reconstruction of social protection is linked to its mandate of bringing together representatives from the government, employers and workers, from its member states for joint action to promote labor rights, creation of decent works, develop social protection system and strengthen social dialogue in the world of work. On the social development, now SDG monitors for employment and social protection. As custodian agency, the ILO reports on 8 indicators under SDG 8. SDG 8 is inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. So the agency gathers information on labor productivity, informal employment, gender pay gap, unemployment, and need rates. And under SDG 1, which calls for ending poverty in all its form everywhere, the ILO reports on 2 indicators, including 1.3, gathering and analyzing social protection data from around the world, and developing tools for advocacy and public policy and programming purposes. So with this monitoring over the past 2 years, the ILO has produced and constantly updated information on how and to what extent social protection and decent work have been used as universal instrument for response and recovery to the COVID-19 crisis, which can be used by all of you, all of the member states. ILO believes that sustainable and transformational recovery cannot rely on short-term humanitarian cash transfer alone. Instead, it must aim at long-term, building social protection floor, universal protection schemes, at the same time supporting inclusive economic growth through full and productive employment. In that sense, ILO's involvement across the humanitarian development peace nexus aims at long-term recovery, promoting investment in decent job creation, as well as bridging humanitarian cash transfer with long-term social protection systems. Talking about long-term system, here we are talking about a system to ensure that everyone has access to social protection. One that is comprehensive in terms of contingency covered, that is adequate in terms of the level of benefit, and that can be maintained throughout life when it is needed, literally from cradle to grave. So that when people are sick, when you are sick, when you have an accident at work, when you are unemployed, and when you get old, then you can really count on the system to offer you and your family protection. At the same time, if anyone who can physically and mentally able to work should have opportunity to gainful employment. In the context of shocks such as pandemics, climate-related disasters, or financial crisis, a strong social protection system combined with public employment must be there to automatically kick in and play this fundamental role of automatic stabilizer, as it provides access to basic services and assets, including education and healthcare, gives people income security. In so doing, stabilizes aggregated demand, so it prevents the economy from entering a deep recession that would shatter any chances of recovery. Now, you might want to ask, what about the policy coordination? Yes, to make those policy maximum impact, those policies are to be coordinated with other policy areas. Coordination between, for example, employment policies and environmental policies for just transition is very important for many countries to decide which sector to invest. Policies to formalize employment and transitioning from informal to formal economy, which we know is also essential to finance a sustainable social protection system using both contributory and tax-based approaches. Similarly, comprehensive employment and social protection policies are to be strongly coordinated with disaster risk management and any other frameworks promoting human security, as it contributes to job opportunities that can create climate resilience. This can be done, for example, employment-intensive investment approach focusing on local resources and labor, or green works contributing to rehabilitation of environment and more efficient natural resource management. This is especially true in countries in fragility, leading to necessary adaptation and interinstitutional partnership that are critical to support specific population groups, for example, displaced persons, offering them job opportunities to support their livelihoods and addressing food insecurity or conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, this pandemic has been a wake-up call for all of us for urgent need, not just build back, but to build forward together, new and better. Globally, as the moderator mentioned earlier, social protection system remains seriously inadequate and seriously underfunded. Today, 53% of the world population, as many as 4.1 billion people, do not have access to even one social protection benefit. This coverage gap exists because of significant financing gap. So in order to fulfill this global community's commitment to extend the coverage, developing countries would need to invest additional $1.2 trillion to close the annual financing gap of social protection. To achieve universal protection, a new level of investment is needed, leveraging the power of partnership, including across the humanitarian development peace nexus, making the most of capacities, technologies, principle of social dialogue, accountability, and solidarity. Let me share some of the examples as a concrete application of comprehensive approach in the context of the COVID-19 recovery. COVID-19 call to action in the global garment industry, which was last year launched by the International Organization of Employers, International Trade Union Confederation, and Industrial Global Union, with the endorsement of several global brands, manufacturers, as well as worker organizations. ILO has supported this initiative strongly, and this call resulted in a project funded by the government of Germany, supporting female-dominant workers in garment supply chain affected by the COVID-19 crisis in Bangladesh, Laos PDR, Ethiopia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Madagascar. This support included specific social protection measures in line with international labor standards, combining temporary cash benefit, which is for short term, with longer term assistance, such as integration in social insurance scheme. For example, in Bangladesh, a tripartite consultative council provided guidance and oversight over processing cash transfer in the form of wage subsidy, which is in short term, leading to development of unemployment insurance, which is in the long term. ILO in other countries also provided technical support in a variety of ways, which we can share. For example, in Nigeria, in Malawi, integration of social data in centralized information system. In Mozambique, fostering social dialogue and with civil society involvement in identification of potential beneficiary of COVID-19 response. The last example that I would like to share is interesting. This one is from South Africa. South African presidential stimulus with an ambitious drive to inject much needed jobs into the COVID-19 ravaged economy. This presidential stimulus supports a range of public employment programs through market-based mechanism. Now, this program supports livelihoods while the labor market recovers, investing in public services and goods, enhancing skills, employability, and boosting demand in the economy all at the same time. This basic education employment initiative in this presidential employment stimulus, the stimulus placed nearly 320,000 young teacher assistants providing direct jobs in 23,000 schools. So at the same time, it helped address education backlogs and teacher shortages. Brilliant. Lastly, I would like to say a few words on the UN Secretary General's recently launched Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection. This has been implemented in close collaboration with relevant UN entities, government, social partners, private sector, civil society, with strong support from ILO, of course. The core idea of this accelerator is that coordinated and scaled up investment in decent jobs and social protection will create a virtuous circle of human-centered recovery from the COVID-19 recovery. This accelerator includes 3 pillars, mutually enforcing. Pillar number 1 supports the development of integrated national employment and social protection strategies that accelerate a full, inclusive, human-centered recovery from COVID-19 and a just transition. Pillar number 2 addresses the challenge of resource and resource mobilization, complementing or how to complement domestic physical space, physical efforts with international financial support, including from international financial institutions. And pillar number 3, to enhance multilateral cooperation, including by establishing a high ambition coalition of countries. This accelerator is essential for renewing the social contracts between governments and their people, building trust, social cohesion, investment in governance and social protection, green economy, digital economy, and these could lift 146 million people, including 74 million women and girls, out of poverty by 2030. In concluding, decent jobs and universal social protection are the high road to resilience. Promoting integrated policy solutions that creates decent work and strengthens social protection system is key not only to reverse the tide of poverty and inequality that has risen during this pandemic, but also create the sense of social inclusion, combat the mistrust, intolerance that is emerging in these difficult times. That crisis is unfortunately tearing some of our society apart. In that sense, Secretary General's Accelerator represent a UN-wide system response to the glaring deficit in decent jobs and universal social protection, and to a rapidly moving environmental disaster exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, our firm ambition is to bring together member states, international financial institutions, social partners, civil society, private sector, to build a better future to keep the promises of the 2030 agenda. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miyamoto, for setting the stage for our discussion today and for sharing the many experiences and pioneer initiatives that you're moving forward. It was very important to hear you say that we need to think about COVID-19 recovery with long-term vision and not with short response and humanitarian only setting. And also very relevant what you were mentioning in terms of the humanitarian and development and peace nexus coming into play in order to be able to support a full recovery. Thank you very much for this. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move to our virtual participant, the next one. So I'm pleased to introduce to all of us our first panelist, which is Ms. Carmen Ubaldi. She's the Executive Director of the Technical Unit of the Social Cabinet of the Republic of Paraguay. She has extensive experience in public management and design of public policies for social protection. I understand that she will be delivering her presentation in Spanish today. So if you wish to listen in English, French, or Bahasa, please use your translation headset, or for those who are listening through Zoom, please ensure you are on the correct channel for translation. I'm pleased that Ms. Ubaldi can join us live online from Paraguay today. Ms. Ubaldi, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Bueno, en Paraguay, buenos días. Estamos acá disfrutando acá de un hermoso amanecer. Mi nombre es Carmen Ubaldi, soy directora del Gabinete Social y bueno, soy parte del equipo también de la ministra Carmen Marín, con quien estamos llevando adelante un propósito muy importante, ¿verdad? Que es la construcción, aportar en la construcción social del Paraguay. Para mí es muy grato, en representación del gobierno paraguayo, estar en este espacio de diálogo, de intercambio, donde podremos contar la experiencia de Paraguay en cuanto a lo que es gestión social ante la pandemia. Bueno, para iniciar me gustaría comentar un gran desafío y una gran oportunidad con la que cuenta Paraguay. Con relación al desafío, una realidad que nosotros contamos en el Paraguay es lo que tiene que ver con la baja cobertura en seguridad social.
Siguiente diapositiva.
Siguiente, por favor, si podrían pasar la siguiente diapositiva. Entonces, tenemos que 2 de cada 10 paraguayos aportan al sistema de seguridad social. Y esto implica que nosotros tenemos un gran desafío en cuanto a resolver la informalidad, y eso requiere de reformas profundas. Ahí en el ranking de la región podemos observar que aproximadamente el 20% de los trabajadores aportan al sistema de seguridad social. Entonces acá como país tenemos un gran desafío. El siguiente. Ahora quiero mencionarles la gran oportunidad que tiene el país en materia de bono demográfico. ¿Sí? Siguiente, por favor. Bueno, 7 de cada 10 paraguayos es menor de 70 años y esa es una gran oportunidad para el desarrollo del Paraguay. Pero esto conlleva muchos desafíos. Tenemos que apostar también al desarrollo del capital humano, y para eso el Paraguay está trabajando en varias líneas, ¿sí? Entonces, ¿en qué está trabajando el Paraguay? El siguiente, por favor. Y ahí me gustaría ir desde lo más general y luego ir a un caso exitoso. El Paraguay desde hace unos años viene trabajando en un sistema de protección social. Sí, por favor, me pueden pasar la siguiente diapositiva. Este sistema de protección social está construido de manera participativa con diferentes sectores, con el sector público, con el sector privado, con la sociedad civil, y tiene 3 pilares. Uno de los 3 pilares se refiere principalmente a lo que es inserción laboral y productiva, donde están marcados este desafío y esta oportunidad que estuvimos viendo al inicio. Otro pilar que tiene el sistema de protección social es la integración social, que está relacionado a salud, a educación y también a otros temas. Como dijimos, tenemos que apostar al capital humano. Para eso tenemos que atender derechos sociales básicos. Y el tercer pilar es el de previsión social, que está relacionado a todo lo que tiene que ver también con la asistencia y la seguridad social. Entonces, esta política pública tiene un enfoque de derechos, es para todos y todas, a la vez focaliza sus esfuerzos para dar especial atención a los grupos más vulnerables. Y aquí me gustaría contar un caso, una experiencia de éxito que tuvimos desde la gestión en la función pública en Paraguay ante la pandemia. Entonces, me gustaría comentar la siguiente diapositiva, por favor, si podríamos avanzar. Para trabajar en este caso de éxito, tuvimos que identificamos nosotros 3 elementos, 3 aprendizajes, 3 temas que tenemos que profundizar. Por un lado tenemos la gobernanza del sistema de protección social. El sistema de protección social, como lo dijimos, no son políticas orientadas exclusivamente a situación de vulnerabilidad y pobreza, sino está orientado a los derechos sociales de toda la población. Y ahí tenemos muchas instituciones que trabajan, más de 26 instituciones que tienen que articular esfuerzos. Entonces, la gobernanza es un gran desafío que tenemos en materia de protección social en Paraguay. Otro gran desafío que tenemos es el fortalecimiento de la información social. Debemos contar con información basada en evidencia para la toma de decisiones, oportuna. Y eso, una gran lección aprendida también que nos dejó la pandemia, que ante la necesidad de dar respuesta y tomar decisiones rápidas, contar con información social es clave. Ya venimos dando pasos en materia de sistema de información social y bueno, ahora queremos dar también otros pasos más para fortalecer esta herramienta. Y el tercer elemento clave es contar con una red integrada de servicios. Contamos con servicios que dan respuesta a las desprotecciones de las personas pero estos servicios tienen que trabajar en red. Entonces, este también es la integralidad, también es un enfoque que maneja este sistema de protección social. El siguiente, por favor. Entonces, ahora vamos a entrar. A partir de estos 3 elementos, queremos contar una experiencia que tuvimos desde Paraguay, que para nosotros es una experiencia muy interesante porque estamos buscando capitalizar para que también se pueda institucionalizar. Ante la pandemia, como dijimos, uno de los grandes desafíos, tenemos gran porcentaje de informalidad, ¿verdad? Sabíamos que había gran porcentaje de la población que estaba siendo vulnerable ante esta situación, ante las consecuencias de la pandemia. Entonces, teníamos que identificar quiénes son, dónde están, ¿sí? Ahí hablamos de contar con información social. Entonces, uno de los elementos muy importantes es el tema de la innovación, de poder generar un mecanismo de registro rápido y al mismo tiempo dar respuesta a esas personas que estaban en situación de vulnerabilidad. El segundo elemento, la alianza público-privada. Nosotros, este programa, que más adelante les voy a contar cuál es, se llevó adelante con el esfuerzo del sector público y del sector privado. Otro elemento importantísimo que capitalizar, la trazabilidad. Al utilizar mecanismos tecnológicos y también al tener una nueva forma de hacer llegar el apoyo a la comunidad, que esto era a través de tarjeta cédula, le decíamos, con tu documento de identidad vos podías acceder al servicio sin que estés dentro del sector bancario o que estés incluido financieramente, podías acceder. Y el cuarto elemento, ¿verdad? Lo que tiene que ver con la eficiencia de que el servicio llegaba de manera oportuna a la persona. Nosotros sabemos que en el caso de la pandemia tenía que ser en el momento, entonces toda esta innovación nos permitía llegar en tiempo y en forma a las personas que necesitaban el apoyo. Y el quinto elemento, la cobertura, ¿sí? Ahí sí podríamos pasar, por favor, a la siguiente. La cobertura. Tuvimos una cobertura, además de estar en diferentes puntos del país donde vimos que la necesidad era mayor. También pudimos llegar a 2 de cada 10 personas que estaban hospitalizadas en el tema de COVID. Eso es el 80%. Entonces, ¿en qué consistía este programa? Se llama un programa Putivó Medicamentos. Lo que hacía era hacer una transferencia para subsidiar el gasto de medicamentos a pacientes que estaban internados por situación de pandemia. Entonces, esto fue un mecanismo rápido que se activó, ¿verdad? Tanto desde la innovación, la tecnología, la trazabilidad, y también un elemento muy importante cuando hablamos de alianza público-privada, de que el Paraguay, la gestión pública se encargó de gestionar y articular tanto el programa como el operativo, y contamos con el apoyo del sector privado para que sea más ágil la entrega, ¿sí? La entrega a las personas. Otro elemento que es muy importante que me gustaría destacar, que tiene que ver que el servicio era para las personas, como decía, que estaban, el apoyo para las personas que estaban internadas en hospitales por tema del COVID, ¿sí? El operativo contó con mucha presencia y apoyo de los recursos humanos, de las personas del sector público para trabajar en este operativo. Hubo un contacto muy de cerca de apoyo tanto para los hospitales como para las familias, ¿verdad? Este sistema de protección social pone a la persona en el centro. Entonces, uno de los recursos más importantes que tenemos de la gestión pública son los servidores públicos que hacen que estos procesos funcionen. Entonces, contar que este mecanismo, este programa, Putivó Medicamentos, es una herramienta de respuesta rápida ante situaciones de emergencia y en este caso ante el COVID y en tema de salud, ¿verdad? Entonces lo que estamos buscando como país es capitalizar esta experiencia, incorporarlo a la función, a la gestión de la función pública del gabinete social, porque si bien estamos construyendo una visión a largo plazo, estamos construyendo un sistema de protección social que atiende, que mira, que da respuesta a los derechos sociales, tenemos que dar el paso de atender a los más vulnerables y a las personas que necesiten hoy. Entonces, el desarrollo de mecanismos de respuestas rápidas, innovadoras, eficientes, que coordinen entre el sector público y privado, que lleguen en tiempo oportuno, es fundamental. Y bueno, entonces, para finalizar, comentar gratamente que el país tuvo la oportunidad también de demostrar la capacidad que tiene en gestión social ante situaciones de emergencia, en este caso como la pandemia. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Ms. Ubaldi, for this very comprehensive overview. And you really took us through the key elements, structure and thinking behind your social protection system, built with different sectors hand in hand in order to pay attention to the most vulnerable, and also with a very careful eyes in terms of innovation. I also really appreciated the fact that you consider youth as a precious capital. Thank you very much for this. And now I would like to go back to our room, and I would like to invite Mr. Setareki Makanawai, I hope I pronounce your name correctly. He's the Chief Executive for the Pacific Disability Forum based in Fiji. Mr. Makanawai is a keen advocate of disability inclusive development, where persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are from and centered. Mr. Makanawai, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, I could ask a colleague to, in the room, one of the technical personnel to be moving the slides for me, please. We'll start at slide 2, and then I must thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and thank also those of you that are in the room, and particularly those of you that are also joining online to participate in this event. The experience that I'll share with you with the Pacific Disability Forum that I work for is social protection targeting persons with disabilities. And in slide 2, we were saying that social protection is a precondition to inclusion. We are in an organization. There are 6 preconditions to inclusion that we are advocating for, one of which is this social protection for persons with disabilities. What we're seeing here also that the realization of these the social protection systems and structures are key to benefit persons with disabilities in a society, and also the taking into the consideration of disability extra cost and the diversity of persons with disabilities. It's not one size fits all, but there are differences within the disability community based on their needs. And we've also seen that when governments talk to persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, the systems that are being developed, the social protection designs are more relevant. Slide 3, please. Saying here that we have 13 Pacific Island countries that that have developed and offering social protection schemes for persons with disabilities. And also the consideration of disability extra cost. I think this is usually critical to persons with disabilities over and above our impairment. The cost that come with this impairment on the individual, on the society is huge. And we see that also enabling persons with disabilities to be resilient and better responding to the situations around them. We've also seen that the 30 Pacific Island countries that are offering social protection systems largely also a result of the advocacy by persons with disabilities, and those that are not, countries that do not have any scheme at the moment, the Organization of Persons with Disabilities are advocating for that provision in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Slide 4, please. I'm saying here that social protection for persons with disabilities, not only in terms of social, in terms of a precondition to inclusion, but also as a safety net. We've been talking about the recent pandemic, the COVID-19. It does make life even difficult to persons with disabilities, more challenging over and above what they have to live with every day. And we've seen that in inclusive social protection schemes, when we talk about cash grants and we talk disbursement of rations, have been useful in helping persons with disabilities and their families cope with the challenges that are brought in by the pandemic. And also in terms of data, the collection of data and the presence of data, the existence of data when we offer social protection schemes are useful. Also it help governments in keeping track of those that are often in many a term referred to as a vulnerable group. So able to keep traction, the numbers of persons with disabilities benefiting from such a scheme. Slide 5, please. We're also saying here for those 13 countries, some of them, the schemes need to be reviewed in terms of the uptake and the scale up of the programs. And also saying here that maybe not just a focus on the one a single initiative like cash grants, but maybe there are other ways of supporting the needs of persons with disabilities. And the need for government to look at fiscal investment on these marginalized, the forgotten groups would be very beneficial as well. Slide 6, please. Here, just the different schemes that we believe could be made available to persons with disabilities. We have, of course, the disability-specific schemes. We've, I think, heard that also. The disability-relevant schemes, these are schemes that are not offered specifically to persons with disabilities, but recipients like the veterinary pension and old age pension, some of them are persons with disabilities. Targeted mainstream scheme in terms of employment, eligibility to persons with disabilities. And then also the fourth one we've seen, the mainstream scheme, available to everybody, and persons with disabilities too can access. Next slide, please. I'm just saying here, I think in terms of duty bearers and rights holders, in social protection here, in terms of rights-based model, the duty bearers as governments consult persons with disabilities in the design of social protection schemes for persons with disabilities, whether it be contributory or non-contributory. And the rights holders, these are we're saying here persons with disabilities or those that are being targeted for such a scheme are being consulted and in a sense of a rights-based approach. Next slide, please. Then, of course, the big issue of sustainability of such a scheme. We also believe that for this to be sustainable, all these different stakeholders must be actively involved. The government, of course, in terms of political will and the consultative approach, includes structuring the systems on social protection to persons with disabilities. A corporate sector, we see corporate sector, the private sector to be very important in the role that they play, the sustainability of such a scheme, either through contributory or non-contributory structure system to social protection. And of course, finally, the target group and recipients themselves informing and advising the best of their needs to be met in such a scheme. Next slide, and I think I've come to the end of my protection of my presentation this evening, and apologize for the delay in some of the sharing of this. Just that I'm getting a bit sleepy. It's supposed to be midnight back in Fiji. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Makanawa. On the contrary, I think you gave us and presented to us a very clear, inclusive social protection model. And I also very much appreciated the considerations in terms of people with disability to become a resilience force for advocacy and beyond. I think this is a very important message that is necessary to carry through and to build on. So with this, and as always, time plays against us in these events, I would like to call on the last presenter, Ms. Armenia Hairapetian. She serves in the rescue force for the military of emergency situation for the Republic of Armenia. And she was appointed to be the national focal point for the Sendai framework for the country. Her remarks will be given by a pre-recorded video message. I would therefore ask to send the video, and please, if you care to remain for a few minutes afterwards, I would like to ask the people in the audience if you have any questions or any comment on what you heard today with us. So please, let's show the video. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished participants, it is my honor to join you at the World Reconstruction Conference for the Social Protection Mechanisms, Learnings and Challenges discussion, and I will be honored to share the Armenian experience. I want to thank also very much for very interesting questions, which will be, I think, in the target with the discussion with many of you, and I would like to address to some of them due to time limitations. As you may probably understand, the COVID-19 response and the social protection measures in Armenia was realized under the umbrella of the Ministry of Social Protection and Labor in terms of social protection mechanisms. But according to the legislation of the Armenian Republic, the main body during the emergency situations, the authorized body to cope with this is the Ministry of Emergency Situations, which was playing a very active role together with the Ministry of Health and other line ministries. The roles and responsibilities in the COVID-19 reality were distributed at the national level, regional and community level. The national and regional level, they are more or less the same way, where ministries and governmental bodies according to the legislation act, according all established contingency plans, the governmental decisions, standard operation procedures, and so on. However, as far as the COVID-19 pandemic was an unexpected with new challenges, with so many restrictions and unknown things that should be well organized. Special measures were taken by the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, and the office of the commandant's office was created with special liabilities to coordinate, organize, and realize the whole response operations. Of course, recommendations from WHO were also the guiding principles which the country on the national level and all of the levels was trying to implement. On the community level, the measures were realized, of course, through the governmental bodies, but mostly with private organizations, national platform, NGOs, volunteers, and the citizens themselves. The first part of the question was, how was it possible that, or which were the enablers that some countries could respond or can respond faster and more comprehensive way. For this discussion, without going into much detail, although you can already understand from the diagram that this is not a flat situation, that this is evolving in time, and it has its own logic to evolve after the disaster strike. When we learn on each step, integrated data management is necessary. War scenario-based contingency planning. This step also, both of these first two steps, there are ones that should be prepared already before, or anytime they should be at disposal of the disaster management bodies, and they should be in place. The lessons learned, constant reviews, self-analysis, improvement. These are steps that should be taken in the course of the recovery or response course, midterm reviews and so on, and trying to improve on each step. Implementation of recommendations is also very important, because we have seen that in many cases, I don't mean in Armenia or in a certain particular country, but it is in life in general, the reviews, the assessments are realized, and the recommendations is a challenging one, sometimes due to just their nature of they should be connected to the situation and realistic. The maturation of the social protection systems, fiscal space, and political will. For these questions, I think that for each of them, transparent, comprehensive, and up-to-date data is necessary, together with coherent, interconnected legislative background, which will bring to evidence-based decision-making, enabling to solve the situation the most prompt and most efficient way. The second question was really very interesting, and I divided it into two parts. What has been learned from the social protection response to the pandemic? I will leave this part for the second, after this second part discussion. And has this been a testing ground for new technologies, including digital? Indeed, it has been a testing ground, and not only for technologies and digital or anything else. It was testing ground for everything, and the lessons learned should be built on these findings. I just want to mention here that the Ministry of Emergency Situations cooperated with all of the governmental, non-governmental organizations, but mostly with the Commandant's Office, providing 3 shifts with 53 persons per each shift, to call constantly to the people and trying to make them to apply these new digital technologies for the, the stay home application. I will not explain it. We were cooperating with the Ministry of Health, providing the service for the hotline, answering the people's calls, trying to give them guidelines how to act, and so on. The cooperation with police, regional governments, municipalities, and even citizens on demand if something was really necessary to do, we were there. But on this way of response, very serious challenges appeared, with among them the psychological challenges, which were due to an unknown nature of the situation, and most of the people were not familiar, or they were not aware that can be anything that will make to restrict to limitate their independence. And some people, mostly elderly ones, either they could not, or they were refusing for technical reasons or so to have these applications, or they were afraid for their well-being, for their food, and so on. So the psychological challenges, they were always there, and we were trying to solve these issues by the assistance of the Rescue Service Psychological Assistance Division, which was making calls, answering to the telephone calls for the people in panic, also supporting families who had children. In Armenia, we have the June 1st for the children, the Day of Children, and this day, for the first time in their lives, the people were saying that the children should not go out. Elderly population, vulnerable groups, isolated people, and so on. All this was realized by the telephone calls, Zoom calls, by all the affiliated people of the division. What has been learned from the social protection response to the pandemic? Pandemic versus disasters. I would like to compare and say that unlike earthquake, landslide, flood, or any other disaster, which are limited by spatial and temporal dimensions, the pandemic can be everywhere and at the same time, all at once. This was one of the most big challenges of the situation, where everything seemingly collapses in front of your eyes, or can collapse. The real vulnerable may be hidden. What do I mean here is that constant reviews of databases on the vulnerable people for the social protection mechanisms should be applied, and all of the actors working in the at the community level may be contributors to the identification of the vulnerable citizens and help create data charts on the state needs, measures, and developments for each of them. Help the ones on the front line. It is about establishing mechanisms of harmonized cooperation between institutions, elaborated and realistic contingency plans. Of course, there can be other points to mention about this, but one I want to mention: observe, analyze, find solutions. A comprehensive study realized by the UNDP in partnership with EMEA, Ministry of Emergency Situations, National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, and other stakeholders was realized already in September of 2020, October. This was the social economic impact assessment of the COVID-19 outbreak in Armenian communities. The link is given below, and you can go through and see all the findings and recommendations from this assessment. Only one example I have taken, and this one shows that the biggest fears were connected to have difficulties to keep up with the basic food, hygiene expenses, products, to have difficulties to pay for utilities, and the one to have problems to transform to alternative heating means. And as you see on the orange one, also together with these ones, also significantly is mentioned the psychological, mental, emotional health, which was affected in this period. These are all thoughts, all ideas for thinking and for discussion maybe, but I would like also to share the ideas on the recommendations. Of course, due to time limitations, I will not read all of them. I would just mention that they were separated into groups for recommendations concerning health, protecting people, economic response and recovery, macroeconomic response and multilateral cooperation, and the social cohesion and community resilience. With this, I want to thank you for the possibility to share my thoughts with you. I hope to engage in a very resultative dialogue. Wishing you a very interesting global platform in Indonesia and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ms. Hayarapetian. And with this, we have closed the presentation. I know that our time is over. However, I would like to address the audience. Do you have any particular question or comment that you would like to share with the keynote speaker and or the panelists with us? No, I don't see any hand up. And considering that we are over time, let me share just one thought that has emerged from our discussion today. I think all our speakers strongly recommended an inclusive process in building social protection, particularly if they are to be appropriately tailored to meet the needs of people with disability, informal workers, and vulnerable population. The second element that emerged commonly, it was data, the relevance of data, how it is collected, how it is analyzed, how it is used. So with these two elements, I really would like to thank the panelists, whether they are in remote mode and in particular the people present with us, the keynote speak. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. Bye-bye.